Welcome to How to Find More Direct Clients Than You Can Poke a Stick At podcast, a mix of both solo episodes and expert interviews. Our ideal listener is an early career, ambitious, and passionate online language services provider. She is committed to professional growth and achieving success in the fiercely competitive translation and interpreting industry. She balances multiple responsibilities with resourcefulness, values mentorship, is open to learning, and investing in her professional development journey. She embraces technology and seeks to optimize workflow, eager to connect with like-minded peers and build out her professional network. She is determined to overcome challenges and become a sought-after freelance translator. And here's your host, medical translator and translator business mentor, Jason Willis-Lee.
Anna Lundberg is the founder of OneStep Outside, where she helps experienced professionals around the world design a career, a business, and a lifestyle that brings them more freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment outside of the conventional 9-to-5. She is the author of Leaving the Corporate 9-to-5 and Outside of the 9-to-5 and host of the Reimagining Success podcast. She lives with her 2 young children on the south coast of England. Welcome, Anna Lundberg, to the show, How to Find More Direct Clients Than You Can Poke a Stick At. So happy to have you here. Thank you for your time. How are you?
Thank you, Jason. I'm really well. Really great to connect.
Great. Thank you. I'm your host, Jason Willis-Lee, and this is another episode to kick off. I'm really happy to welcome Anna because we share a membership together. We're in a membership called the Youpreneur Incubator with Chris Ducker. So tell me a bit about your business. I know you talk a lot about success. I'm subscribed to your newsletter, Reimagining Success. What's it all about? How do you help us be successful?
Oh, great question and a big one. So I guess we have to go back. We were just talking before we came online about my sort of academic background. And I always say I was that kind of typical good girl, did well academically, went to good university, Oxford, went sort of straight on conveyor belt to a good job in marketing at Procter & Gamble. And then 2013, I, for whatever reason, and we can dig into that, but I reflected on, hang on a second, what am I doing and why? I'd studied the one thing I'd planned to help the world, as we all do when we're young, and I wanted to make an impact, work in international development and work at the UN and so on, and I'd ended up marketing perfume. And there was always a bit of a disconnect for me. So as much as I always say, and I always caveat this, I loved the work, my colleagues, I learned so much. And that time at Procter & Gamble really opened doors for me later on. And I'm so grateful for that experience. It wasn't an intentional career choice as such. I had colleagues there who really were passionate about the beauty industry and lived and breathed that world and marketing and so on. So I asked for a sabbatical in 2013, went to South America by myself for 3 months. And then halfway through that, I quit because I knew that if I came back to Geneva in Switzerland, which is where I was, I would get back into my comfort zone, my lovely little bubble with my friends and cats and so on, and I wouldn't leave. There was also a personal dimension. Several of my best friends were all sort of getting married and having kids, and I wasn't there at all. So there was sort of a moment of, I want adventure, I want to do something different. There was an element of, I want to make more of an impact, have more freedom and all these things. So that kind of triggered a whole personal development, immersion, opening up of a can of worms, but a positive one for me, reading, listening to podcasts, and so on. And initially I did marketing consulting. So I kind of took what I'd be doing, digital marketing in the corporate space, and I took that into my independent work. Then I discovered coaching, twists and turns along the way. And I've ended up kind of combining those two. Although, to be honest, now as I speak to you, leaning more and more away from the marketing and branding piece and more into, I've done a positive psychology course, organizational psychology, work-life balance, those kinds of questions. So there are 2 streams, I suppose, or not 2 streams, but 2 arms, I'd say, to the business. One is B2B, so business to business. I still work with organizations, I do workshops, I do executive coaching within the corporate framework. And then I also then do B2C, business to consumer, working with individuals as more of a business mentor, helping people transition out of that corporate space and into working for themselves. So I think that side is sort of what's most relevant for your listeners today. I live down in Poole with my two little kids. They're 3 and 4. So work-life balance is a personal, meaningful and challenging topic for myself. So I kind of live and breathe those questions as well.
That's amazing. There were so many common points. You mentioned Latin America. I mean, we could easily do this interview in Spanish. I'm pretty sure your Spanish is fluent. Yeah, I would be. And then you mentioned Procter and Gamble. I went through all those applications as a graduate when I left when I left clinical medicine and clinical research. I did a bit of clinical research for a while. I applied to P&G. I applied to Unilever. I applied to Mars. So I was on that kind of graduate conveyor belt as well. From what you said, the most interesting thing was the organizational psychology and the work-life balance. Could you dive a little deeper into that? Because I'm guessing there's a lot of busy people on the other side of the listening to this, and the busy life is so that there aren't enough hours in the day to sometimes do all the tasks we want to do. How does organizational psychology tie into work-life balance, and how does that help us find a more healthier work-life balance for all of us?
Yeah, I mean, the organizational psychology, it was a micro master's online, which is obviously great flexibility. To be honest, I signed up to it early last year, very full of ambition and so on, and kind of did one of the 5 modules and then didn't do anything all year. And then I got an email saying, oh, by the way, this expires. So I very quickly worked through the rest. So it was a little bit imbalanced, but that's, the work-life balance is not always that perfect harmony, is it? But for me, lifelong learning is one of my values anyway. And I'm always looking for opportunities. And given that I want to grow my kind of corporate organizational side, I was curious, how can I extend the work that I'm doing with individuals to understand more the dynamics of the workplace? So it was more about leadership and managing change and those kinds of things. But funnily enough, one of the 5 modules was on well-being and work-life balance. And of course, it's a huge topic coming out of the pandemic in particular, but I don't think, it was particularly good before that, right? But stress levels are at an all-time high, and all this disengagement, we hear about quiet quitting and all these things in the workplace. I think there's a really important moment happening where we can redesign work, whether we're talking the 4-day work week, moving beyond the 9 to 5 is what I talk about. So we're working from home more, the boundaries are more blurred. We really need to look at productivity, really. As you said, by definition, we will never have enough time. And that's not the point, right? We need to work out what is it that really matters and focus more and more on those priorities, whether it's work and your big projects at work or in your business that will really make a difference and earn you the income and so on, or in your personal life, what really matters. And so I'm really fascinated by that. And the other point to pick up on, I suppose, is the busyness. And I have a big kind of, this is my current obsession with this busyness thing going on, that we kind of have this society celebrates being busy. Oh, I've got so many emails, and even I felt for it last week. I'm on my way into London. I've got 2 workshops I'm delivering. Check me out. I'm so in demand. And it kind of gives me a little boost of, I'm so important and valued. Yeah. And if we're not kind of getting all those emails and running around and so on, what is there? And we're left with quite an uncomfortable kind of vacuum where we start questioning things and we feel fear and we're nervous and so on. So there's some definite interesting psychology going on there, and how we can reframe.
Do you think one of the problems is wearing business as a badge of honor and not sort of, and then the work-life balance becomes a problem because of that? We want to be busy.
Definitely, yes, exactly that. I mean, also because work in our society, and I say that loosely, but is so tied to our identity. And when I left my corporate job, it was a big moment for me to let go. And it wasn't a moment. It took me years to not be that senior manager at Procter and Gamble. I used to go to conferences and people would want to talk to me because I was from that big company. To say, it took me a very long time not to say, I used to work at, I kept holding on to those things. And when you change direction, to say confidently, I'm a coach, I'm a writer, I work for myself, and I'm an entrepreneur, whatever the label is, that's a huge shift in your identity. And even in the business world, there are so many social media points us in the direction of all these, there's the hustle culture and working more but loving it and all this stuff, and it's quite an unhealthy place there too. So it's not about corporate versus working for yourself. There's a general societal malaise, I guess, that's gone a bit wrong, where we're, as you said, celebrating this badge of honor of being busy. And of course there's a growing movement and there are sort of little glimmers of hope, but it's still quite uncomfortable, I think, to have those moments, and unusual, certainly, for me to sit down. I don't feel particularly comfortable sitting down and doing nothing. I feel like I should be running to get the laundry or exercising or whatever it is, doing something for the children, learning something, reading something, listening to podcasts while I'm showering, because goodness me, I can't possibly take 5 minutes to shower and not learn something, and that's quite, even talking about it makes me quite.
What is the antidote to hustle and grind? You and I both follow a leading productivity expert, and he teaches us it's not working harder and doing more. As you say, squeezing, and you're in the shower listening to a book. It's not sort of doubling up on tasks. It's feeling joy and being more productive through feeling joyful. What is the antidote to hustle and grind? Is it that search for joy, the quest for joy during our activities? And lots of people listening will be wondering. And then we'll talk about AI and how AI is changing the landscape as well, because you're a work expert and this is all so interesting. How do we get away from the hustle and grind? I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about what the best resources are to give my audience to optimize, leverage AI tools. We're talking about that. I'll do a webinar in a few weeks on that, and that will be a big part of the webinar. Because I feel that my people are afraid of AI tools. First of all, the latest wave of technology is AI. Before that, it was CAT tools, computer-assisted translation. We got through that. Now it's AI, and it's BWX, it's DeepL, it's co-translator AI. And lots of people think that the tools are going to take their work away. They don't really think or learn how to compete with them. So I try and work out ways of teaching them that this is not a threat. It's something that can help us. But what is is that something we can do to beat hustle and grind? Is it just leveraging our time better and productivity?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to pick up both those things, both the joy piece, and then let's start maybe with the AI, since you mentioned that. So my mum was an interpreter. She retired a few years ago, but she preferred interpreting because she's a good girl and a perfectionist, like I always was. So it was clear where I got it from. And she felt that with translating, as a perfectionist, you'll just spend more and more time doing it because you want it to be perfect, and you could look up and is that the right word and so on. Whereas her simultaneous interpreting that she did in the European organizations, yes, you had to prepare and so on, but basically you went in, did the meeting, even if you made mistakes, it's kind of done and then you move on, and that kind of suited her. I tend to agree with her. For me, I prefer to do a live. I might say and not say the perfectly articulated sentence, but then it's done. Do you know what? It's good enough. It'll give people some insights, and then I go on. Whereas the first times I tried to do videos, 8-9 years ago, they were awful, and I just refilmed until I gave myself a migraine, and they were awful, the videos I was doing. For my mum, I know she's always complained about in the industry these sort of, I guess, hustler, startup-y companies that know nothing about languages and translating and so on, that bid for the work at the lowest possible price, then have people who are not qualified, certified, not good at what they do. That gives the whole industry a bad name. That means that they're putting qualified, high quality translators, interpreters out of work and so on. And so I think that's already a challenge, as you said, pre-AI, for you to stand out and build for me, it's about personal branding and demonstrate your qualifications and educate, I suppose, the industry as to, just like it is in coaching, to be honest. There's a huge debate because it's not a regulated industry. I think there are some interesting similarities there. So I think that hasn't really changed. With our AI, just like if you're a copywriter or even, I pride myself on being a writer, and you're writing a book, and it does worry me too that people can now just pump out articles, and people are even publishing books, right? I think Amazon put a limit on, what was it? I don't know, you're not allowed to publish more than 1,000 books a day or something ridiculous because people were publishing. So of course it's a little bit worrying, but then at the same time, I think people will see through that quite quickly. And again, for me, it's about trust and quality of work and demonstrating that expertise and building that personal brand and so on. Having said that, of course, you can use AI to optimize your productivity. And so, and I'm playing around with some tools, to do the transcripts for my podcasts, to even write some posts for social media, because social media, it takes a huge amount of effort to write the post. And actually, at the end of the day, it's not like the most important thing.
Could you tell us which tools? Would that be Otter?
No, absolutely. So, no. So in the past, I've used Otter. I used Rev.com, which was real people, but I guess at a very low price. It was sort of 1 cent per word. But I use Cast Magic now specifically for podcasts. So I upload the episode, and it can actually give me anything I want. I put in the prompts, but it'll give me the meta description and the keywords, a little reel text, 10 questions to ask for workshops, the introduction for the website, an email, a LinkedIn, you know, really whatever you want. Now, I'm not saying I would ever use that as it is. And most of the AI that I've seen is very sort of American, unleash your inner beast, da da da. It's not at all my tone of voice. But nonetheless, you know, I'm not saying that we should ignore AI, of course. There is a concern, and I think we should think about it. And I think there are smart ways to leverage it.
Yeah, that's very useful because there are subtitlers listening. There are probably audiovisual translators. So I use Otter myself when I have transcribed episodes. So that's very useful. So your book is called Beyond the 9 to 5. I mean, talking about those blurring of boundaries you mentioned, give us a couple of blasts from your book. What are your couple of central messages of redefining success and this idea of, I mean, I often feel these days that I'm not working. I enjoy my sort of the creator side of my business. I mean, I still translate and edit, but I don't feel that this talking to you is work at all. I just think it's just huge value. And I know that people listening to us will find this valuable. So give us a couple of sort of central dogma from your book. What would you say? Move out of the Beyond the 9 to 5, it's called.
Well, so the two books that are published are Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5 and then Outside of the 9 to 5. I've just done a white paper, which is Beyond the 9 to 5. So everybody will get very confused, but it's all around the same sort of tenets. I have 5 pillars in my business mentoring. The first one is defining success for you. Second is cultivating confidence and resilience. The third is choosing the right business model. The fourth is building an effective personal brand. And then the fifth is work-life balance. So that's a quite sort of holistic, comprehensive way in which I work with my clients. And then the book kind of guides you through those. My course does the same and so on. I think coming back, nicely to what you just said about our call, I agree. These kind of interactions I would never have had in my corporate time. Being able to interview people, connect with people that I would never otherwise had seen and have these really interesting conversations. This space that we're talking about, it is my life. Work, you know, there's such a talk about blurred boundaries. These are all fascinating questions. You know, how can we bring more joy to our work? What could be a more interesting question to ask? So I'm very fortunate. I love the idea of joy. I haven't used the word joy so much. I often use the words freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment. And then when it comes to productivity, for me, it is asking, what does success look like for you? Because busyness is kind of busyness for the sake of busyness. I can feel like I'm ticking off all these things and I'm replying to all these emails. At the end of the week, what have I actually achieved? And we talk about writing books, for example. I had a lifelong ambition to be a writer. And that was just one of those things that kind of sat there on the shelf with this huge, impossible dream of being like a J.K. Rowling or Stephen King or whatever. But when I took that huge ambition off the shelf, I thought, what does writing involve? I need to write. And when I looked at my calendar, I wasn't spending any time writing because the goal was just too far away and I just wasn't taking any action. So I started a blog, I started a newsletter, wrote some ebooks, wrote a few articles, and ultimately I've self-published a few books, you know. So no, I'm not on the New York Times bestseller list, but I'm beginning to come to terms with the fact that I can say I'm an author, I'm a writer. I'm beginning to stack the books that I've written. And that, you know, that brings me fulfillment. So it's about being really clear on, why do you want to do this thing? You know, if you want to lose weight, why do you want to do it? Is because you care about the number that's on the scales, or is it because you want to be healthy and fit and live longer and play with your grandchildren? You know, that's a far more meaningful goal to have. And then it doesn't really matter if you weigh a kilo more or less or whatever. And I think the same applies to your business. It's so easy to get caught up in these people's 6-figure, 7-figure, 9-figure, blah. You know, is that what we want? No, I don't think I do. There's sort of a ceiling. I want to be comfortable. I want to enjoy my work and I want to have that balance.
The editor of a popular author I follow, I think she was a bit miffed at his deadline, stretching deadline, said to him, so is this book really a priority for you? Looking at your schedule, it would appear not. I think that was quite
exactly that. There's a quote from Lao Tzu, I think, which is, you know, it's not about, if you say that you don't have time, you're actually making a choice. You're saying, I don't want to. And that feels quite provocative, but it's true. I don't have time to exercise. Okay, but you're choosing a whole lot of other things. Maybe lying on the sofa watching Netflix, or staying in bed a little bit longer, spending time on emails that I don't need to answer, I don't know. But there are definitely choices that we're making, perhaps subconsciously, that if we shed some light on that, we could perhaps make some different choices if we wanted to.
Could you dive a little deeper into the you mentioned the personal branding as part of the book, and that's something I talk a lot about as well, because I've got an audience, concerned about their personal branding, and we talk about online visibility, we talk about standing out, talk about double edge, finding that unique selling point, however you want to put it. How can my audience of, online language service providers spruce up their personal branding with the threat of AI, or the perceived threat from AI? I think it's more that we're not leveraging it fully. We're just a little bit scared, to almost not lazy, but or maybe, maybe a little bit reticent to step up and do the work necessary to learn these tools. And I'm trying to learn Bureau Works. It's a new tool on the market, and it can pick up homonyms and difference in context. If I write free and fee, and it's one or the other, it will flag that up. And that's previously a tool. We didn't have a tool that would do that. So I'm trying to just carve out some time to learn these things. How do you go about personal branding? Because this is so important. We're all personal brands now. The business brand and the big exit and the perceived less work is a thing of the past. I think people are coming onto the personal branding roller coaster. How do you go about this with your audience?
Yeah, it's a funny one because, of course, as you said, we all have one, whether we want to or not. And I get very reluctant people who are sort of, oh, it feels really uncomfortable to think of myself as a brand, to sell myself. And, I used to sell perfume and skincare, makeup, and it's much easier to sell a product, a brand, than it is to sell yourself. So to some extent, I think it is important to have a bit of a boundary. Even when I'm selling myself, this is a persona. So for example, I know there's a thought leader called Matt Church, and his name, as he says, his family calls him Matthew, but his sort of stage name, if you want, is Matt Church. Now, it's not like Bono or Madonna, whatever, but it's, he's just slightly different. My sort of professional name is Anna S.E. Lundberg, mainly because it's such a common name, Anna Lundberg, with 100,000 people in Sweden, that I need that for social media handles and so on. But it just gives me a bit more, like, that's kind of my logo. That's my kind of business that I'm promoting. And it just gives me that little boundary. So that's just one little thing. Ultimately, though, it's about being yourself, but about curating and crafting and making sure you're coming across in the way you want to. So if you Google yourself, if you're non-existent, that's a bit of a problem. If you're, back in the day, maybe a sort of drunk photo of you from Facebook would come up or something, and that's not great either, So it's just thinking a little bit about how are you appearing now, and does that match where you want to be? And I came from my digital marketing background that I said was very much about content marketing. At the time, our brands had microsites for every perfume they launched. It wasn't coherent and cohesive. It was flash heavy. It wasn't search optimized, mobile optimized, all this stuff. So I worked closely with Google and YouTube and media agencies, with Facebook, to create content strategies. And so I've kind of brought that into my solopreneur work as well. And it used to be that I said, okay, there's me and what I want to talk about as the business, and then there's what the client wants to talk about or what they're interested in. So a great example, by the way, and this is going a little bit off topic, but laundry detergent used to be, every website about laundry was like, hey, buy this laundry detergent, here are the ingredients, and blah, blah, blah. What they started doing was they had articles on how do you get red wine out of white t-shirts and that kind of thing, right? So there has been this big move to kind of creating more engaging content, and that kind of has led to a whole machine of people kind of generating all sorts of content, so it's easy to get lost. I still think that's where we need to be looking. So we need to be creating content at the sweet spot between what I want to talk about, what my business should be talking about, and what people want to learn about, and the questions they're asking. What questions would your clients have around, how can I hire the right translator? How do I know if they're good? How do I judge work, price, whatever it is, might be questions you might answer to kind of add value there. But then the second piece, which I have to hold my hand up and say I missed, is the visibility piece. I can spend all my time doing all this stuff on my website and my social, but no new people are seeing me. So of course, going on other people's podcasts, writing articles for other people's platforms, maybe collaborating, speaking opportunities, whatever it is, then, gets you in front of other people. Because if we're not getting in front of new audiences, we're not really growing, are we? So
exactly, it's leveraging other people's audiences and getting the backlinks to your stuff. When you mentioned your stage name, I was thinking of a story, and I'll link it to a personal branding story. It's Alfred Hitchcock in the 1940s. His first boss in Hollywood was David O. Selznick, And I think the O did stand for something. But he later put this into a film called North by Northwest, which was released in 1958. And the Roger Thornhill character is called Roger O. Thornhill. And Ava Marie Saint asks him on the train, what does the O stand for? And he says, nothing. So he's poking fun at, well, who was his previous boss, and just injecting that bit of humor into his, which is personal branding. And that's Hitchcock doing personal branding before personal branding became a thing.
True.
And that was 1958. And I'm just a Hitchcock freak, and
Yeah,
I should probably inject
I
some
don't love
Hitchcock.
scary films, but I mean, they're not as scary as I find the old ones more sort of artistic,
that's a
aren't they?
suspense film. I mean, that's one of the greatest suspense sequences on Mount Rushmore and the James Mason. We could just talk about hours about Hitchcock, but I'll probably get tomatoes.
But I suppose that the main thing to highlight is that without it, you're a commodity, especially in the world of AI and so on. You know, if I've had, and I tell this anecdote, probably I've written it in my book too. I had two people over the last 10 years who came to me sort of for a free discovery call to see if they want to work with me.
Yeah.
And they each had like 12 other coaches they were talking to. And I knew, and I don't want to, you know, put myself down, but I knew they wouldn't choose me, because if you've got a list of 12, you're doing like what, a spreadsheet to see which one's the best. I don't want to poke fun if that's their decision-making process, but I think that's going to overwhelm you. You know, why would they choose me? Someone else is going to be cheaper, or, you know, there's going to be some other reason to choose someone else.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to stand out. Whereas my preferred option is when someone gets on the call, they've listened to my podcast, they've read one of my PDFs or articles, they've come to my free workshops that I run, you know, they know that I'm credible. They know that I can add value. I have already helped them. And so now it's just a question, okay, is it this program or that program, or should I start now or next month? I don't have to somehow kind of persuade them in that 30-minute call. And I don't have to reduce my prices to kind of, as they always say, kind of Walmart levels. I guess we should say Aldi or Lidl here, or whatever the cheapest one is, I don't know, in order to compete, because that's just a race to the bottom.
Yeah, it's about investing in a person and in just finding the trust, or finding you click with somebody, you know, finding that resonance, I suppose, what that person's talking about. That's what I always say. Let's go into the content marketing, because you mentioned content marketing in the context of P&G, was it, when you were doing the perfumes and
with the
detergents? How would, so I've got an audience of freelance translators. Music to my ears, what you say about personal branding, de-commoditizing, just as Hitchcock did in that film, and you and I talk about a lot. How could content management be used in conjunction with personal branding to get that
Great
across?
question. Can I turn it back on you first and say, for example, your translator website or that of your clients, what would that have on it? What would an average translator kind of put on their website?
I suppose it would have language combinations. It would have previous jobs, testimonials, and social proof is very important. I advise not putting on prices. So just a 2-minute whiz round the site to draw someone in. It would have an opt-in. I teach people how to embed opt-ins. If you do a website, there's absolutely no point doing a website unless you're running traffic and eyeballs to that website. So that's doing SEO. And I teach people how to embed an opt-in, but that means getting into an email management program like ActiveCampaign and doing, starting to build a list. You presumably you have a list. I mean, I have a list, a small list, but I have a list, and there are people who read me. I'm getting pretty good open rate, 60-70%, which is good. It's obviously a small list. That number will go down as the list gets bigger. So I feel there's in my audience, there's a little bit of delayed or reluctance to build a list because it's just perceived as hard, and people just kick it. So I've got sort of people certainly doing the website and SEO, and then I'm sort of trying to push a couple of people a bit further to do the lead magnet. And but yeah, to answer your question, it would just have the basic language combinations. The niche is very, very important. At my most beginner level, I've got people who don't have a niche. A niche is absolutely vital. I came from a very strong niche, which was medicine, so I was lucky in that I could position myself. I've got a couple of people doing two niches, education and medicine, or maybe literary, academic, and something else, commercial. So you can split test two niches. You can do all sorts of things. There's no limit. So yeah, those are the kind of things I teach in my course. How to find more direct clients. Then you can book a sticker, and that's what we're trying to get across. That kind of content on the website. But how did Procter and Gamble go about this? I'm guessing you worked there, maybe.
Well, to be honest, that was sort of 15 odd years ago, so I don't know. But I mean, I can bring it up to date to what we do now. I suppose the first question is always for me, sorry to be repetitive, what does success look like for you, and what both income goal do you have and lifestyle goal?
Yep.
Because again, you know, what happens, I think, is that we either don't think about the business model, or we just and we end up with sort of a default one, accidental business model that probably doesn't deliver on our goals, or we've kind of copy and pasted someone else. In my space, I'm sure you see it too. People are like, you've got to do webinars. You shouldn't do webinars.
Yeah.
Group program, no, it should be one-to-one. High level, big like volume, you know, everyone is teaching you different things, and they could all work, they have all worked, but do you want it to work? Is it going to get you to where you want to be? So for me, those are kind of the foundational questions. The thing about content SEO now, I think, is that we're not Pampers or BuzzFeed or whatever. And I think, you know, and even then, in fact, it was a long game to write content. So, you know, to build my brand is going to take time. When I transitioned out of luxury, beauty, FMCG, corporate into coaching, positive psychology, meaning of life, success, that didn't happen automatically. For years afterwards, I had recruiters coming to me, you know, job offers and interviews and whatever in my old space, because that's kind of what my CV said. So it took me a long time to kind of change the direction of my ship, which took writing articles. Even now, in fact, that I'm focusing more on kind of productivity and so on, relatively quickly I've been able to, you know, my podcast is all about productivity now for the next few episodes. I'm telling people, hey, I'm focusing on productivity. So in a way, you can quite quickly, as long as you have the confidence, just state it, you can kind of create the reality you want. So I think that's also very interesting. It's a long game, but you can also relatively quickly network, go on podcasts, write some articles, and boom, you're an expert in a space, which is quite nice. We don't need to have 1 million followers. And I think that's also important. That probably means we shouldn't follow the strategies of those sort of huge entrepreneurs that have all those huge lists, especially when people are starting out, right? I think, and I'm not an expert in your industry, so you could, I'm sure, add much more value here. In terms of visibility, what comes to mind, of course, is, and again, I think of my mum, of course, there are, for example, directories of translators and so on. So getting into those, you know, you're not going to stand out, unfortunately. I had a wedding music what did we call her? Consultant, I think, really. He was on those kind of wedding directory sites, and she got quite a lot of work there, but it was low quality. People weren't really willing to pay premium prices. It was relatively kind of basic stuff, but still it was kind of, I'm there. We tried to minimize the time she spent on those people, but still it was a nice little consistent, got a few referrals and so on. Then if you want to have, the same for me, by the way, is if you're on all those sites like Upwork and Fiverr and so on, yes, you can get some work, but you really have to make sure that you're going for kind of the high quality, credible clients, and not the ones who just want to pay you $5 to write 3,000 words or something, which is not going to work. So there are those kind of directories. Then it's thinking about how can you get in front of those right people. And if you're trying to build a list, I guess the only watch out is making sure you're building out of the right people with the content you're creating. So of course, for you now, you have the two dual arms of your business. You still do some service of actually translating, and you have now the sort of the translators you're attracting.
Correct.
If you weren't building your business as the entrepreneurial translator, your list should be people, clients within the industries where you're wanting to do translating work, right? So that's sort of a different audience. So if you were to write, if I, as a translator, start writing, hey, how to be a freelance translator, I'm not going to get the people who are hiring me. I'm going to get the people who are like me wanting to be a translator. So that's not helpful. So it's thinking about, okay, who is the audience I want to attract, and what's the value I want to bring to them? Again, just being realistic, I think we're not going to be the top result when there are probably huge agencies and platforms that have a huge amount. You can go very, very niche perhaps, but then it's getting clever with talking to people, going to the right places, really. With the business model, it's funny, there is no right answer, because I have a coaching friend who went to Oxford, and she doesn't like marketing, doesn't do any marketing, gets all her work via word of mouth. I come from the marketing background. I like it. I have a podcast, I have books, I have blogs, I've got all the stuff, and that works for me too. So, and there's a whole host of nuances in between the two, right? So if you're kind of getting referrals and word of mouth and you're happy with that, that's fine if that's giving you enough business. I think the danger there is that it's not giving you enough control, because you don't know when the next referral will come, right? I got a random one last week. Yeah, I happened to be free, but it wasn't something I could have planned into my pipeline. It's not going to pay the bills if I don't know it's coming in. So that's where we want to really look proactively at getting clients who will also give us kind of the repeat work and so on. And that requires more effort from you. Like for me, when I pivoted from FMCG into what I'm doing now, and getting quite uncomfortable perhaps with putting yourself out there and, you know, contacting people and whatever that looks like. So there's a few different ideas in there. So I'd love to hear from you what's most useful, and we can focus on that.
Yeah, I think word of mouth is the least work. Obviously, I like the sound of that. Word of mouth, you're just so good that everyone talks about you, and you don't have to do any marketing. That's the best marketing. And then I suppose we could talk about productized models of. I think my audience. I was thinking what you said about one-to-one and one-to-many. That's obviously divorcing your value from your time and getting into a one-to-many situation. Once you realize, you know, hopefully that will come for me later this year. But yeah, I mean, in terms of service provision, it's all about making yourself easy to be found, online visibility, having good social profiles and website, driving traffic to that. I like the lead magnet idea because I think that if you do have a valuable piece of content, you could easily sell for £100 or €100 or whatever. That just draws people in closer to you. What language combination was your Ma as an interpreter? Was it Swedish, English,
so we're
English?
Swedish. So obviously in the European organizations, you can only do it into your native tongue. So she did English, German, and then she ultimately qualified in French as well into Swedish.
And
so
she was in
she
European,
joined.
yeah, she was in the cabins in the European booths.
Yes, exactly. So when Sweden joined in the 90s, she, you know, she'd never really done interpreting before, so she was very talented and sort of slunk in, but she loved it and she was excellent. And it was a very high pressure environment, but it suited her, and of course, really exciting to be there in the organizations and so on.
I did a couple
she
of
didn't
tests.
like doing the legal things, and you know, you have different preferences. There are maybe younger colleagues, she would say, could do kind of some of the things, or like the being with the sort of high level presidents and very high risk conversations. But of course, there's a great photo of her when what was this? I think it was the Spanish representative is waving a cucumber in the paper, and my mum is in the cabin in the background. So that was, like, for me, a highlight of her career anyway. This cucumber debate, and my mum is there in the background. So, you know, you got to sort of
we could think of some good captions for that photo. I'm
Absolutely.
sure. It's like I like how I got news for you. Okay, so let's go into the final five. I'll just give you a couple of fun questions. So I've got a whole. What's the best business advice you've ever been given, or maybe you've given someone else?
Oh yes, I give very good business advice. Let me think. Gosh, I think it's a general life advice, and I'm sorry I can't attribute it to the right person, but I certainly realized this over time. There is no right answer. So I'm very sorry. That's quite frustrating, but hopefully also empowering, because again, being this good girl academic, and I imagine a lot of sort of the translator community, and I know there's a lot of women listening as well, will be in this space. I'm looking for someone to give me a gold star, a tick, good girl, Anna, you're doing the right thing. And the truth is, this is your business, your life, and there is no blueprint to follow. So yes, please follow the experts like Jason, understand what they're teaching you, and then it is your decision whether you apply it letter by letter, or you adapt things, make sure it's working for you. So it's not that we're going to one day wake up and aha, this lead magnet is the right one, and now I'm a millionaire. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It's a whole host of subtle, nuanced things. So it's, you know, stay curious and keep discovering and learning and so on. But there's not a moment when you'll sort of land on the, ta-da, this is it. It is an ongoing journey. Curious, and I think that's exciting as well, right?
Yeah,
so hopefully that's
absolutely.
Good.
Networking, how important is getting into the right rooms with the right people? I've met you through an excellent membership, and I think the networking is first class. I wouldn't have met you had I not joined that membership. So then we've had this amazing interaction through that. How important is that, getting into the right rooms with the right people to our careers or success in general?
So I think it's very important, but I'm very bad at it. I've you know, been working from home for years pre-COVID, partly because I just wanted, initially I was traveling with my business, so I was not so much networking, I was just kind of online. And then of course the pandemic and young children, I've started going to more in-person events, which I'm really enjoying. But that's more for me. I think being a solopreneur is very lonely potentially, and a lot of people stop doing it because they miss that community. So not for any kind of mercenary reason, but I think it's important to be with people who are like-minded peers going through similar things and so on. With the community that we met through, 100%, I think the best thing about joining these group programs hasn't been the knowledge and so on, especially for me, because I'm quite kind of seasoned in, I've done this for a decade now. I kind of know what I need to know, not to say that things don't change, but I kind of know all the basics. It's much more about meeting people.
Absolutely.
And it could be podcast opportunities or just hey, I never thought of translators as a possible audience. Maybe that's an opportunity for me to shift my business model, whatever it is, right? So it could be work, it could be just a personal connection. You could find accountability partners. So I'm not the best person to sort of recommend a kind of hardcore networking strategy, but I would 100% encourage you to join these communities and see where you find kind of the right culture fit and where you get the encouragement and the cheerleaders and the accountability that you need.
Building a VIP network. Question 3, final 5. Here's number 3. If you could enact one law for the whole world to follow, so you're now global legislator number 1, what would that law be?
What if people answered that previously? I should have done my research and listened to the last final 5.
That's a good question. I'd have to go through the previous episodes to... I'm trying to think of who I asked that.
It also takes me back to my, because I studied PP, so I studied politics and we did Rousseau and we did the social contract and so on. So hopefully my tutors aren't listening to me because I'm sure I should come up with some very intelligent answer. I think in a way, and I'm kind of sidestepping it, very philosophical answer, laws are there because they kind of capture the general norms of society. Like if they didn't, we would break them all, right? So I think there's an element of, I'm going to be a bit sneaky, say there's something around, employees shouldn't need to go to the office and work the 9 to 5. That isn't even a law as it is, but there's some really weird sort of corporate, sorry to say, white male kind of hierarchy going on that still wants us to stick to, what used to be the factory mindset of going into the office. And we don't realize that now, men and women are working and it just doesn't make sense anymore. So I don't know if I'd make it a law, but I'd certainly sort of take away whatever norm it is that is making us stick to this kind of rigid Monday to Friday, overworking, busyness. Badge of honor that we talked about at the beginning.
If you had a blank billboard to put on the blazing big avenue in Poole, Dorset, what would you put on it? If you couldn't put up your company, if you could put something else, what would you put?
What does success look like to you?
That's a good one. Very good. That's a good one. Final 5th question. What would you rather have and why? Gills to breathe underwater or wings to fly?
Oh, wings to fly every time. I love freedom. I live by the sea now. I've done skydiving and all those things when I was younger. I love paddleboarding, being on the water much more than in the water. I love freedom and the air. And I was always, astrophysics was another one I was considering when I was younger. I love space and looking up and so on. So definitely flying every day.
Wow, astrophysics. Anna Lundberg, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts for my audience? Any final pearl of wisdom that would change their lives to end with?
It's a big ask. I would ask you that billboard question, what does success look like for you? And it's a big philosophical meaning of life question, but it's also something you can ask in the moment. So ahead of this interview, what does success look like? Well, I'd like to connect with Jason. Maybe I'd like to promote something that I've created, whatever it is. What does success look like when you're doing a post on LinkedIn, when you're going to a networking event? For today, what's my one big thing that will make the difference? I think it's a really useful question to be asking. Then at the end of the day, you can round it off. You don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't make $1 million today. Be like, did you learn something new? Did you go outside? Were you present with your family? Did you enjoy yourself? Those are some really powerful things to achieve as well. It's not just about the clients, which are very important, but it's what the clients get you rather than the income and the clients for the sake of it.
Brilliant stuff. That's a wrap on this week's episode of How to Find More Direct Clients. That was Anna Lundberg, and we will be back next week with another episode. Until then, stay on your game, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.
Here's a fun fact about Jason. The son of 2 music teachers, Jason is still a keen amateur pianist. Thanks for tuning in to the How to Find More Direct Clients Than You Can Poke a Stick At podcast. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, why not head over to www.entrepreneurialtranslator.com to access all our tools and resources to monetize and future-proof your freelance translation business. And don't forget to hit the plus button in Apple Podcasts or iTunes, or subscribe in Spotify to be notified when new episodes drop. For regular tips and insights, business strategy, or marketing techniques straight to your inbox, please sign up at www.entrepreneurialtranslator.com.